Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia and welcome back to our 10-part guide series covering reforms in Total War 3 Kingdoms. This episode is part 8 and will be covering unit unlocks. This guide will be an overview of all the units available to unlock from the reform tree and provide comparisons between the unlock units and their militia counterparts. Let's get started by first taking a look at the entire reform tree here. We can see that there are 18 units that can be unlocked from the reform tree, as shown by the highlighted reforms. It is a lot of unit, but not all units in the game are unlocked this way. First off, militia units and certain specialty unit like the trebuchet are available from the start. Faction unique units and certain default units for each class are also available to the generals once they reach the rank of 3 and 6. So Reform is only responsible for unlocking a select group of units in the game. Of this select group of units, 5 stands out as they're the ultimate elite dragon units. Each color has their own dragon unit, and they're unlocked by the reforms shown here. These reforms are often located at the end of the longest branch of each reform color. Another interesting fact about the dragon unit unlocking reform is that they're always the reform that require the reforms of the prior color to unlock, with the exception of the green reforms. But that is mainly due to the fact that the main branch of the tree cuts off the green reform from the otherwise circular Wuxing connection that goes among all the other colors. These reforms also require the most prerequisite reforms to unlock, ranging from 5 reforms for the green dragon unit to up to 13 reforms for the yellow dragon unit. So clearly the dragon units are an expensive investment in terms of reforms, recruitment costs, and upkeep costs, and we'll see in this guide whether these costs are worth it for these units. Let's once again start with our green reforms. We can see here there are 5 units that are unlocked by the green reform. All 5 of these units are considered to be polearm infantry in the game and inherently have a bonus charge reflect against cavalry units. So they're all excellent counters to cavalry units in the game, and this will largely define their role in the game. On the reform tree, I have listed out the unit names next to the reforms for your benefit, and now we'll take a look at the unit stat breakdown. We'll mainly focus on the stats, as the recruitment cost for all these units will vary quite a bit depending on which faction you play or what bonuses to recruitment and upkeep costs you have acquired through items or traits. So I will not be talking much about unit costs in this guide and instead be relying on the stats for comparison. First, we have the peasant band and the spear warriors, which are your light and medium spear infantry unit. Peasant band is worthless as a unit with no strength other than the fact that they are cheap, and I would recommend you to never build these in any of your games. Spear warriors, however, are similarly statted to G infantry. The only difference here is that the spear warrior has a much higher charge damage, so they're better suited as an offensive unit, while the G infantry has a more balanced base damage and armor piercing damage breakdown and are better suited as defensive unit. Although both units do suffer heavily from not carrying a shield and thus end up with 0% range block chance. Now the heavy G infantry is an improved version of the G infantry unit that has a superior armor rating, a high morale, thus making them last longer on the battlefield. Finally, we have the Azure Dragon, which is the green dragon unit. This unit is very unique as it carries both a glaive weapon and a bow and arrow, which allows it to attack from both range and melee. The range damage is also quite high, but the ammo count is quite low, which will also not be helped by the low cunning of most champion characters. Although you could have your strategist recruit the Azure Dragon, as all dragon units are recruitable by all colors, it is still not that great of a range unit when compared to the more specialized Blue Dragon unit in the Onyx Dragon. In terms of melee stat, the Azure Dragon has the same armor rating as the heavy G infantry, but they have a much higher rating for melee evasion and have a much better morale, charge damage, and total attack damage as well. They also share the same weakness with all the rest of these units in that they do not carry a shield, so they all have 0% range block chance, which really hurt all their chances as frontline units. Azure Dragon could potentially be an excellent rear flank unit, as they're capable of stopping both a flank cavalry charge and be able to fire arrows to thin down the enemy lines as they approach, as long as you have some other unit soaking up the arrow damage in front of them. Next, we should compare if these reforms are truly necessary by comparing these units to the POLEARM militia counterpart in D militia. Here I'm using D infantry for the direct comparison, as it is the direct upgrade of the D militia unit. If we take a look, we can see there are three main differences. 1. Militia unit have no access to formations. This prevents them from using the pike wall and hollow square, which are stronger against charges in general. 2. They have less morale. Morale is probably the most important stat for all units, since no matter how strong your units are, if the morale is low, then they can always turn tail and run. So a lower morale stat can vastly decrease the effectiveness of a unit. Lastly, D militia also has a bit less armor. This is less of an issue, but the 12% difference will still show up when your units are engaged in melee combat with other melee infantry who rely on high base damage. All the other stats are pretty similar. My take is that it is not worth going for these green units. The Azure Dragon might be the only one worthwhile because their interesting mechanic of carrying both a range and a melee weapon. But all the green reform unlock units can be replaced by these two units right here, which are available to all champion generals at level 3 and 6 respectively in the spear guards and the heavy spear guards. Both of these units have great morale, good armor piercing damage, but most importantly, they both carry shields and have access to the turtle and circle formations. The spear guards and heavy spear guards are perfect to carry out the role of a frontline defensive unit that can withstand enemy cavalry and archer damage, which will buy your range unit the time needed to inflict maximum damage. Next, we move on to the red reform, where there are 4 units to unlock as shown here. If we take a look at them, we can see that 3 of them are shock cavalry units, while 1 of them is a strategist only mounted archer unit. Let's talk about this range unit first to get it out of the way, since it is clearly different from the other 3 units here. The mounted archer is the only mounted range unit in the game. Its strength is that it's highly mobile, has a super fast firing rate, and has good range damage. And it carries a lot of ammo. Its weakness is that it only has 30 units per group, so the higher ammo count actually translates to less arrows to fire at the enemy units, and their high firing rate just means that they will run out of ammo faster. They also have poor morale and almost no charge damage, so once they run out of arrows, they're pretty useless. On top of all this, they require a lot of micro to be used effectively, and I'm just not sure if they're worth that effort. As for the 3 other shock cavalry units, we can see that they all have high charge damage. The peasant raider is pretty terrible, just like the peasant band, and unless you're absolutely strapped for cash, I don't see the need to ever recruit these. Lance cavalry, however, is a decent at everything type of unit. It has good morale, good armor, and good speed. Its charge damage does stand out, as it is even stronger than that of the Jade Dragon, but the Jade Dragon has more mass due to its heavier armor. It also carries a shield, so there is a high range block chance with the unit, and also it has high morale. We should also note that very soon with the release of the 8 Princes DLC, the base game will also add in armored shock cavalry to the game, so this comparison here might become obsolete soon, but for the time being, we'll say that the Lance Cavalry was a very good at everything unit, while the Jade Dragons are more of a shield carrying shock unit that has very low base damage, but still excellent charge damage. But back to our unit comparison here, where we'll see how well these units stack up to the militia version of the unit. We'll be comparing the militia Lancer unit to the Lance Cavalry since they are a direct upgrade. We can see the key difference here is once again, the militia unit has no access to formation, which are wedge and diamond here. Both formation increases the cavalry's charging mass at the cost of speed. The actual charge damage bonus is close between the 2 units with a slight edge to the Lance Cavalry, but the extra armor for the Lance Cavalry slows down the Lance Cavalry, so we can see a much slower speed. Now, since the impact knockback damage is made up of both mass and speed, the charge potential of the militia lancer is actually on par with that of a formationed lance cavalry unit. So I would not go out of my way to rush for this reform to upgrade the unit, but once you do get the reform, it is always nice to upgrade to the lance cavalry. But in the meantime, you can definitely rely on militia lancers to carry you throughout the game. Next, we move on to the yellow reform, which only unlocks 2 units in the saber cavalry and the yellow dragons. Let's look at the yellow dragons first here, as we'll be talking about the saber cavalries when we do the comparison with the militia version. So first, the yellow dragons are a shield carrying axe infantry unit that has access to turtle and circle, much like the spear guards. This makes them an excellent frontline unit. They also have incredibly high charge bonus, which makes them a great offensive infantry unit as well. They have great morale, high range block chance. All of this just make them the perfect frontline defense / assault unit, meaning that they can stand there and absorb damage in the first round as the enemy get closer, and then once they make a certain distance, you can send your yellow dragons forward as a charging unit to utilize their devastatingly high charge damage. Although it is very hard to justify the 13 reform investment just to reach the reform that unlocked this unit, but in terms of looking at the stats and the use of this unit, the yellow dragon is an excellent unit, and in the late game you should definitely utilize these to help you win the game. Now, let's take a look at the saber cavalry by comparing it to its militia counterpart. Once again, like the shock cavalry version, we see there are 3 main differences. The non-militia version have access to formations, has more charge damage, but also once again is slower due to the armor worn by the riders. Although they're not as damaging as their shock cavalry counterpart, these units do carry shields and thus have a high range block chance of 65%, which can go up to 85% with the commander's nobility skill. This makes them excellent for sponging up the enemy ammos or just charging at the enemy range units without worrying about the return fire. Next, we have the 3 purple reforms. We see here that these reforms unlock the Axeman, the Saber Infantry, and the Pearl Dragon. First, we can see that the Axeman and Saber Infantry units are very similar. The difference being that the Axeman does more armor-piercing damage and has less armor than the Saber Infantry, which does more base damage and is more heavily armored and thus better at blocking arrows by 5%. The Pearl Dragon, on the other hand, is very interesting unit. It is the only unit that doesn't carry a shield but still enjoys 60% to range block chance. They're portrayed as these skilled warriors with glaives that are good at evading enemy attacks with their high melee evasion and dodging enemy arrows in Matrix style. The issue here is that they have low armor, so if they don't evade well through chance or they're flanked, so they lose their evasion from the front, they die rather quickly. And also, even though they carry glaives, they're not considered to be a polearm unit, so they don't get the bonus charge reflect against cavalry, so they can't withstand charging cavalry either. I've tried these units out many times in game with mixed results, so I would not strongly recommend these as they tend to look better on paper than they are in a real fight. Now, if we compare the Saber Infantry to the Saber Militia real quick, we can see that stat-wise, both units are actually very similar. But the key difference here is that the Saber Infantry is better armored and has access to shield wall formation, which help them withstand charges better and improve their range block chance against archers. This one formation is a huge boost to the unit and thus make the similar status Saber Infantry about 10 times better than the Militia version, so you should always upgrade to the Saber Infantry. Finally, we're at the blue reforms where we have 4 unlocks. 2 of the units here, however, are absolutely worthless and not even worth our time. They are the repeating crossbowmen and the heavy repeating crossbowmen. These units are close ranged range units that suppresses enemy charges. It sounds fancy, but that's not why we need our range units. Range units needs to have range to kill enemies before they can even charge you. So these 2 units are terrible with their slow firing speed, low ammo count, and the pathetic 100 range. Highly recommend you to just stay away from these two units in all of your games. Next, we'll jump to the Onyx Dragon first, as we'll be doing the Archer comparison very soon. The Onyx Dragon is the only bow infantry to have 250 range. They also have high damage, access to fire arrows, high ammo count, and high morale. They even have a 52% melee evasion to help them stand in hand-to-hand combat once they run out of ammo. These all make this the ultimate archer unit and one of the few dragon units that I can wholeheartedly endorse. Now back to archers, which is a great early game unit. If we compare it with the archer militia, we can see that it has better morale, as Archer Militia has one of the lowest morale in the game. It also has higher armor for withstanding hits, and 7 more base ammo count. Now, 7 ammo might not seem like much, but ammo correlates directly to damage output for range units. So 7 more ammo count, or a 37% increase in ammo, is like adding 37% increase to damage. Add on the fact that you only need 1 reform in the private tutor to unlock the archer unit, who is not even that much more expensive than the archer militia unit. You should always get the reform as early as you can, just to replace your archer militias with the much superior archer units. With that, this concludes part 8 of the series covering unit unlocks. This is one of the few times we actually looked at unit stats on this channel, and I hope to develop a complete guide series in the future covering units, battle mechanics, and battlefield strategies. So hopefully I'll have that ready for y'all soon, as I know a lot of you are interested in guides for the battle aspects of the game too. Once again, if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel to receive notification of the latest episodes, guides, and let's play videos. I also take requests in the comment section for other guides, as well as general suggestions to help improve this channel, so please feel free to drop a comment below. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and see y'all next time. Bye!